so Jenna and I come up with a series of questions that we use to kind of bring on new people into the group. And it is a bit a bit of labor, but we actually vet every single person who joins through the membership flow. And we make sure that they're a practitioner, that there's a practice. We can actually correlate their name to their practice. And it's our way of just doing everything we can to ensure that we're bringing in verifiable practitioners that have an interest in peptides, and we're trying to keep all the spam and the affiliate links and all of the lead gen and all of that stuff out of the group. So it's I feel like it's a full-time job because I'll wake
It is
up
a
in the
no easy task.
I'll wake up in the morning. I'll wake up in the morning and there'll be like 45 people in the queue, and I'm like,
I would just
oh.
like to interject. Mike is far better at this than I am. Sometimes I'm opening up the floodgates, but then I said, no, no, no.
Well, and then there's this mysterious thing that Facebook does and lets people in the group without answering any questions. And then we're going back and we're having to remove them from the group and start all over again. So, but the other thing that we do actively is we monitor all of the comments on a regular basis. Every single day we go back and scan through the comments, and if we see anybody trying to do lead gen or spam links or anything like that, we ban them from the group because we don't want
Yeah.
any of that in the group. All right, we're gonna have to. So I guess we can get going. It looks like I'm gonna be getting more people participating, and I'll let them in as they pop into the group. But I guess we can start off by saying, welcome to the first official Ask a Lawyer Zoom from the Peptide Practitioners Group. I'm Mike Schwarz, one of the admins of the group, and Jenna is there as well. She's the founder of the group and co-admin. And we have with us right now Courtney Walker, who is not only a lawyer who specializes in peptide-related legal matters, but you're also a clinic owner of many clinics. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, I guess, I'd say, we've already exchanged about nine different kind of questions, and you've prepared something to be able to address most of those. So I guess I'll just hand it off to you, and you dazzle us with your brilliance.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, Mike. I'm not sure about dazzling with brilliance, but thank you for having me and thank you all. I've looked through the list and I see some familiar names and faces, so that is super exciting to me. Like Mike said, I'm Courtney Walker, and my overall goal and one of the biggest compliments that someone can give me is at the end of a presentation like this or a Q&A or some random when I'm at a conference and some random bartender like, I would have never guessed you were an attorney. I think some people might be offended by that, but it's the biggest compliment for me because I think a lot of times attorneys are stuffy and and not approachable, and they tend to speak over people's heads and lots of things that I have zero desire to be. So we're gonna get through some peptide stuff today because that's obviously the topic, but Mike sent over some questions, and as I walked through them and kind of thought about, how I would answer them to the best of my ability for you all, there's really some common thread throughout all of them. So I have a pretty brief, I think it's like 15 slides of just the lay of the land, the legal landscape behind the world of peptides. Because my goal when I meet with clients, and I just did an Instagram video about this, is someone has said this to me recently. You can get two attorneys in the room and get three different answers out of them.
Right.
And the problem with that is that you absolutely can get three different answers, but if someone's not taking the time to really help someone understand how they got to the answer, then the person is not equipped with that critical thinking skill that happens somewhere between the question and the answer. At the end of the day, I have a degree in deciphering Latin. That's literally what a JD is. And deciphering Latin is what happens in the middle of all that. And if I don't I'm really passionate about this, if I don't bring a client into that process and help them understand, as you all do, like when you're diagnosing someone, all the little tiny intricacies that can really change the end answer or the end diagnosis. If I don't bring you on that journey with me, you're just left with an answer and not really knowing how we got there and what could change it in the future. So the goal today is to get answers for you all for the questions that you have, but most importantly, to help you understand the why. So I'm not really the best salesperson, because if I really wanted job security, I would just never let anybody know the why. And so then you had to keep coming back to me to get the answers to your questions. But I think, empowering people with critical thinking skills when it comes to legal is one of the best things that you can do for your practice. So
Yeah, and before you get going, I just wanted to, for the recording and for everyone who's in the meeting right now, we are recording this. I'm also going to have Courtney's contact information and website in the peptide resource workbook that we have in the group. You can find it if you go to the features tab. So all of that information will be there. So if you want to follow up with Courtney for any reason after this, you will be able to find her. I think she'll have a slide at the end with that information too, but we'll have it in the resource workbook.
Just a really brief bit about me and how I became an owner of a couple of clinics. So I'm a corporate attorney by trade. I worked in a couple of really big law firms doing predominantly mergers and acquisitions. And I was approached because a couple of years ago, about 3.5 years ago, by two people who needed help getting their business started and getting it started in a compliant way. And we founded a medical aesthetics company that is now in 12 states. We have multiple locations, and help them get the foundation set up, the legal foundation set up for their company. So much so that on March 14th of this year, I took a step away from being in-house counsel for my own company, which is a double-edged sword. It makes me feel very similar to what it's going to feel like, I think, when my kids go off to college, which is like, I'm so proud of myself that you don't need me to help you buy your groceries, but also like, are you sure you don't need me? um, and so now I get to help practice owners across the United States do exactly what we did, and secure their foundation. So it's been a lot of fun. It was 6 months as of yesterday. But I think that positions me in a really unique spot, because often when I get on call with clients, I'm like, which one do you want me to wear first, the legal or the business hat? And when I onboard someone, I start with, and this might give you all some level of comfort. I don't represent a single practice that's 100% compliant. Not one single practice, including my own, are 100% compliant. And the best example I have of that is I don't know of a single practice that is using Botox or Neurotox as a single dose vial when it is technically a single dose vial. And so what we do, or what I do for people, and what we're going to do today is um, kind of compare it to that game of Minesweeper that we used to play on our computers. Like, let's identify the risk and see if the risk is something that you want to take. And if so, how do you add all of that padding? If you remember playing Minesweeper, where you put the little flags around it, like, don't get close to this. So just kind of pulling back the veil on, like, here's where the legal risks are. And if you decide that that is an educated decision with your own critical thinking skills, if you decide that that's something that you want to partake in, how can you add padding? And then there are some times that I say, like, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You just can't do this. I don't care how much padding that you add around it. So let's get started in kind of the backstory of peptides. So to get an answer, I think we have to start where where the law starts. So as a provider, as a healthcare provider, the FDCA says that you are allowed to source your medications from one of three places. The first being a approved manufacturer. So you can see I have Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, obviously a couple that we are really familiar with in the peptide world. The second being a 503A compounding pharmacy. I know there are probably people on this call who use those compounding pharmacies. And then the third is a 503B outsourcing facilities. Sometimes you'll see a 503A, 503B pharmacy all being in one. Like Hallandale is a good example of that, where they have a 503B leg, which just means that they're allowed to compound in bulk, and a 503A leg, which means they are creating patient-specific formulas. But at the end of the day, one of the very first question that you have to ask when you're dealing with the world of peptides is when you're like, can I prescribe this? Did you obtain it from one of these three sources? These are the only sources that you can obtain medications from to prescribe to your patients. So that's why we can't get things from overseas, not one of these three. And also why legally, which we can get into, 'cause I get a lot of questions about it, why you cannot use a research grade or a research lab. It's not one of these three places. And so you are then technically you're importing and prescribing medications from an unlawful source at that moment.
And Courtney, let me jump in here too, because I know there's a ton of confusion about research grade, and you might get into it, but there are several, probably more than several, peptide labs, I use that term loosely, that call themselves like for clinical use only, physician use only, because they only sell to clinicians, they only sell to practices. And then there's those that call themselves research use only, which is usually, for consumers to go and buy from them. But essentially they're the same, they're just labeled differently. And so, like, when people think research and they see this, oh, these are for a physician, this is okay, that we might want to even touch on that too. But I mean, I think you're hitting on it here, but I just wanted to add that clarity because there is a lot of confusion. We've answered tons of questions around this particular issue.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, great point, Mike, and why this is where I spend the majority of time with people. This part of the discussion or any type of answer that someone needs, we spend the most time like laying the foundation for it, because now moving forward, you slap another name on it, where it's for physician only, you don't have to wonder like, okay, is this legal? Is it one of these three? If the answer is no, then it is not a source that you could get for your patients. I don't really care what they call it. If they don't
Right.
have, the proper licensure under one of these three as a provider, it is not legal for you to obtain that medication and give it to your patient as part of their prescription plan. And I think that's, the differentiator between just saying like, can this physician only research lab, can I use it? And like saying yes or no and being like, no, because it's not a licensed 503A pharmacy. It's not a licensed 503B. It's certainly not FDA approved. But yeah, we'll get into a little bit more of that. So here's some just general compounding 101 and some of the language that I see a lot, which is obviously compounding is not a generic version of a drug. It is a patient-specific version, or you're getting it for office use only. And we see that third bullet point a lot in the world of GLP-1s, this current controversy over whether compounding pharmacies who are compounding with glycine or they're putting some B6 in it, are they creating an essential copy of an approved, what is an FDA-approved drug that a drug manufacturer has a patent on, which we'll go back to this slide, and I'll keep going on it in it more in depth to help get your arms around it. And that is a question for the compounding pharmacy. That is the liability of the compounding pharmacy of whether they are producing a essential copy of an approved drug. If you're not compounding, you aren't producing essential copy of anything. You're just prescribing. And so that means the first question that you have to ask yourself is, are you getting it from one of these three places? We'll continue going in more in depth on that. We already touched on this a little bit, but just in case you need anything else on the difference between a 503A and a 503B pharmacies, 503A pharmacies are governed predominantly by your state board of pharmacy, and 503B pharmacies, because they're doing a lot of bulk creation, both are regulated by the FDA, but 503B pharmacies are licensed by the FDA, and 503As are traditionally licensed by your state board of pharmacy. So this gets into one of the most common answers I hear from people when it comes to using a research lab is, well, they're not FDA, compounding pharmacies aren't FDA approved anyway, so what's the difference? Okay, so on the last slide, we talked about, 503B pharmacies are FDA licensed, and then the drug manufacturers, of course, have FDA approved drugs that go through that lengthy process of doing all of the trials to get FDA approval for one or more uses. And at that point, they get, this green check on this is FDA approved for this thing. That's what they're going through the entire process for. And I have a timeline that I use in another deck where to demonstrate what that FDA approval process looks like and to help people understand that getting a drug approved by the FDA starts with a compounded version of a drug. And then a company sees the potential, plucks it out, puts a ton of money behind it to get that FDA seal of approval for one or more uses. Obviously, those are compliant to prescribe. You go down to compounding pharmacies, the medications themselves are not FDA approved medications. The facilities, however, are. And they are one of the lawful sources that you can prescribe, even though the medications themselves are not FDA approved. They're patient specific. It's the whole purpose behind it being a compounded version. It's assumed they're not FDA approved. So when I hear people who are like, well, that's what the fact that a compounding pharmacy is not FDA approved and a research grade is not FDA approved, so therefore it's like apples to apples. This is where, you're 2 strikes, 3 strikes, you're out, because not only are the research labs themselves not FDA approved, which is where we get over here, but the medications themselves, of course, are not FDA approved either. And they say things like not for human use on them. So this, I hope, and I really welcome any and all questions at any point during this, but I hope, my hope is that everyone on this call, if you're advocating for using a research lab at any point, that you no longer ever use that. Well, compounding pharmacies aren't FDA approved either, so it's one and the same, because compounding pharmacies are one of the sources that you can get medications from legally, and the whole intent is for them not to be FDA approved. So the argument just doesn't hold weight. Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just interject really quickly here, but there are a growing number of peptide sourcing businesses that are popping up that are using very vague language about that they source from, GMP certified labs and pharmacies and this and that. So they kind of hit the entire gamut with this illusion that they do source from pharmacies. But then the bigger question is, if I'm ordering something from you, is that particular thing coming from a pharmacy or is it coming from a lab? So there's a growing number of those types of entities that are blurring the lines. That they say they source from pharmacies, but it's one of 4 or 3 sources that they have.
Yeah, that
I
makes
was
sense.
going to say, to kind of piggyback on that, Mike. Hi, Courtney. It's Mikayla.
Hi.
Hello. I pop up in all your peptide stuff. A lot of them, because they contact me all the time, they will say things like, we own 503A pharmacies, but you owe it. Like, what I always ask is, when it's distributed, what is the name of the pharmacy it comes from? And none of them can answer it. And that's like a good way to weed out, is this 503A, or are they just using like the language Mike was talking about? Because they have to tell you like what the storefront is. And if they can't tell you that, then it's research.
Can I also interject and say that there is a list of peptides that we knew and loved that have been taken away from us. So if it's anything that that you can't get, you have to assume it's not from a legit source. BPC 157, they took away so many things that I had prescribed, and now I'm not able to get through those sources. So that's kind of a red flag as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this breaks down, which I know one of the questions that we had, or quite a bit of questions, are related specifically to GLP-1s and the noise around lawsuits and all of this. I gave this exact slide in a presentation back at the end of March, and I told the group that I work with, there are very few things that I love more in life than being right. And man, I love being right. But I spend a lot of time in this world, and I spend a lot of time on these presentations, because the last thing I want to do is get on here and sound like an idiot, or you'd be like, that girl doesn't know what she's talking about. So this slide I used in March, and this is exactly what's going on in the lawsuits right now. So when you see the news and stuff, you can be like, wow, this is incredible. It's like maybe I should play the lottery if I'm if I'm a fortune teller. So ultimately, this breaks down who governs what, who at the end of the day has liability to people. So at the last slide, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk plucked a peptide out of the compounding world, put a ton of money into it to get a approval and a patent from the FDA. Maintaining that patent, they respond to the FDA. The FDA, as we went through 503A and 503Bs, they regulate certain compounding pharmacies. 503B pharmacies really heavily. They do have some regulations over 503As, but those are predominantly governed by the state board. Then on this other side, and you will notice that there is nothing connecting these people. On this other side, you have your state licensing board, so medicines, pharmacies, nursing. Of course, for me, it would be legal, and they regulate the providers. There is nothing that connects these people, Lilly and Novo Nordisk, to the providers. And we see that there's a big group of attorneys who knew that in March. I don't think that the legal world did a really great job of making practitioners feel okay about it in March. And I know a lot of people stopped prescribing and treating their patients the way that they wanted to, because there was so much fear around the connection between this group, Lilly and Novo Nordisk, and the providers. I'll tell you how you're connected. Truly, you will lose this lawsuit all day, every day, and twice a day on Sunday if you use things like AKA Ozempic or AKA Monjourno. You're going to get sued. You're going to lose. Also, if you start advertising that you're selling Ford Broncos, you're going to get sued. You're going to lose. Why? Because they own those medication names. That is just a business law. If you start using the name of the person down the street, if you open up a Chick-fil-A, this has nothing to do with practice of medicine. It's nothing to do with patents on medication. It is just ownership over trademarked items. That is what will connect the two together. So what we see in the lawsuits recently, or the first round of lawsuits, people were saying things like AKA, in their Instagram captions, because they were using ChatGPT and not running them through any type of legal source. And I know someone personally who had a lawsuit and did not win that. But now kind of the second wave of lawsuits is what we're seeing with like the Mochi Health lawsuit that's in California, is that the businesses are offering the brand name medications, but what they're doing is when the patient comes in the door, they're directing them off the compounding world. So it's kind of like a bait and switch. So it's like you're using the medications and you do offer them, but you're not in practice actually prescribing them to anyone. Or you're doing things like on your website, you're advertising all of the clinical studies and all of the research that's behind these GLP-1 medications. Well, guess who owns those those clinical studies? Like, guess who owns the research? These people. And you're infringing upon their business and what they've done. And so they're going to try to get you that way. But at the end of the day, if they want to stop the compounding world, they can't stop the compounding world on their own. It's already been lost in Florida, where Eli Lilly sued a compounding pharmacy. We see it in Texas too. And the court over and over again is saying the FDA is who regulates these. You're going to have to put pressure on the FDA if you want anything to change in the compounding world. And then, of course, the FDA is not regulating providers unless you're not getting your medications from a lawful source. So now I hope you see some of those like connections where as long as you're getting your medications from a lawful source, which is a compounding pharmacy, and they're doing what they need to do, you're not connected to anyone except for this state licensing board. So of course, if your state, like in Washington, has some pretty heavy restrictions on GLP-1 medications, that's, your licensing board, that's who you answer to at the end of the day. But you're not connected to any of the other parties, which is great news. So you're ultimately not banned from prescribing things. But what I hear a lot when it comes to the world of peptides, because I kind of can do like a hard stop right there. Like that is the law. It's not really overly complicated. I think people start saying, they use different terminology, but if you get on a call with me 2 weeks from now and you ask about peptides, like we're going back to those foundational elements. Like, are you getting it from a lawful source? Are you acting within the scope of your license? Are you treating your patient accordingly under your analysis, under your, as a practitioner, which is a really heavily like clinical question. That's not a legal question. If you can answer those three in the affirmative, then you're acting within your scope and all is hunky-dory. What you can't do when you do have a license is if you're wanting to prescribe something that now has been removed, you can't take your license hat off with the patient in front of you and just be like, now I'm not prescribing. Now I am offering a consultation service, and I'm just going to tell you some things that you should take and send you home with them. And you can't make the argument that that isn't part of their treatment plan because you told them I'm no longer acting as your provider. However, based on what you got going on, your diagnosis, I'm going to prescribe you something, but I'm not your provider. Because I think a lot of people are trying to pigeonhole themselves into that camp where this is what I'm doing as your licensed provider, and here's what I'm doing just as Joe Blow, like these bros that we see on the internet who are pushing all the peptides all over, through sources on the internet. With your license comes a certain amount of responsibility, and that's super frustrating. It's super frustrating for me at times too. I mean, I am severely limited in what I can do as an attorney because I am not licensed in all 50 states. And so I have to get right up to that line of being a consultant in Texas without being someone's attorney. And so I get it, but when I tell someone at the end of the day, like, this is the law, it means something different than if any of you got on the call and said this is a law, because that's not what your license covers. And mine, similar to yours, comes with a level of responsibility, and that I can't just take it off at the end of the day and say like, oh no, that wasn't legal advice, when I told them I listened to all the problems in their business and gave them a solution for it. It's like, yeah, that was legal advice. So, this is more educational, but when I do like a one-on-one meeting, I have to be really, really careful. And in the non-practitioner world, because sometimes it seems easier. It's like, well, if I didn't have a license, I could be able to do all of this. Well, not really, because I think people who are on the internet right now prescribing essentially for people, they're prescribing without a license, and they listen and they do these intake forms, and then they tell people the whole list of where they should go and get their own research grade peptides, and the sources they get. They're creating treatment plans without a license, without the knowledge, tools, and skills to be able to do so. So I think that they have a different liability, but it's a liability in the same, and it would still be to the board for practicing without a license. Which we shared a little bit about this too. It's all about vetting your pharmacy, and it is so true in life and in business. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And I heard some really, really great examples of like, if you know you can't get the medication, if you know it's not on the list, and they're like, oh, well, we offer it. Well, they ain't special. They don't get any like carve out from the things that any other pharmacy can do. It's just too good to be true, and it should start raising some red flags, because knowing that's the first thing that you have to answer is, did I get this from a lawful source? And that's, all comes down to vetting who you work with and having groups like this where you can bounce things off of people and know what to do. Then past that, you're in the clinical world, which every one of you all should feel very comfortable with, which is, are you treating the patient in a way that you feel under your scope is the best treatment for the patient? Naturally, the answer should be yes, or you shouldn't be doing it. And are you documenting it appropriate? The only additional thing I have on this slide that you should be really careful about is check your malpractice coverage. Now, after all the world of, and I have kind of here in my notes, I'm going to read it to you. The world of Eli Lilly, a lot of malpractice coverages are putting in some little caveats. So here's one from a coverage I read last week. Use of any, this is an exception or exemption to their policy. Use of any drug, biologic, or device not approved by the FDA for any purpose, unless such use or recommendation is approved or permitted under the Institutional Review Board protocol, a state or federal law, or a state or federal compassionate use protocol. So that, which I had the person reach out to their malpractice, because we can go, if I can, someone will have to help me remember exactly where I was at in these slides, but it says device not approved by the FDA for a drug, biologic, or device not approved by the FDA for any purpose. Compounding pharmacies are not approved by the FDA. The drug is not approved by the FDA for all compounding pharmacies. So I had them go back to their malpractice and be like, are you telling me that I can't use compounded lidocaine? Is that what you're saying, that I'm not covered anymore? Or was this a carve out that was specifically targeted at something like GLP-1 medications? And just getting that clarity on your malpractice coverage, because the majority of the people that I deal with, my own company, we're using compounded versions of medications. So you want to make sure that you are covered at the end of the day. And then, here's kind of a checklist, which you all are practitioners. You're all doing this, anyway for your businesses, or you should be. Nothing new here, or you shouldn't see anything that's new. And I think ultimately then it just comes down to making sure that as you build and scale and you continue to learn about new modalities and learn about new treatments, that you're providing the best care for your patients, and that you're doing it in a way that is scalable and that is protected as you move forward. So this is, and I gave Mike kind of my spiel. We'll go through this really quickly, and then I'll go to the Q&A and answer any questions that I haven't already answered through all this that you all might still have. But I hope it was really apparent. I hope I get a message from each one of you that says, you'd have a hard time convincing me that you're an attorney, because that is the best news. But this is what I do all day, every day. I live and breathe it, because I want people to make decisions for their business that they feel confident in the decision, and not just that someone told them this is what they're supposed to do. If you decide moving forward that you want to prescribe research grade peptide to someone, that's a decision for you and your business. I can't say that I agree to it, but at least now, hopefully, the why of why, it's an educated risk decision. And so I have 2 ways that I work with clients. It's called the protected practice, which is where I just discuss kind of things like this on a weekly basis. This week's topic is on PDGF, which is all the rage in medical aesthetics right now. And then I have what's called the residency. I have a few people here who I work with in the residency, and it's a 6-month program. It's meant to be a 6-month, we can touch every area of your business, and you can leave confident, and you can leave not needing me anymore, like not needing an attorney, because you didn't just get answers, you got all of the whys behind the answers. And so your business is ready to pivot and scale moving forward, and know that your foundation is really safe. And that's it for the foundation. I can quit sharing and read some questions, and then Mike, you can let me know anything else that you need.
Yeah, I actually have a couple things popped up here. first, we've seen this pop up. There's a couple of them. If you receive a cease and desist letter from whether it be big pharma or whomever, like, what's the best course of action?
Yeah, so best course of action is and I'll have people I have people who've decided to do both. So there are two courses of action. One, I don't know if this group is appropriate to stick up my middle finger, but if it is, you can just imagine me doing it. You continue on the way that you want to. Now, what that does is, you could potentially receive another letter. It's what normally happens. I think I'm up to one practice having 4 letters at this point. But that practice has decided that they feel, and this was, months ago before these lawsuits started failing. So they decided that they're comfortable and they're in operating under their license and their prescriptive authority, and they're going to keep on trucking. And then I had another practice who, this health and wellness area was just about 10% of their revenue. And they decided they didn't even have like a full program built out. And they just decided it was just not worth it because ultimately there's nothing I can do to keep you from being sued. I would argue if any of you have like a bumper sticker on your car, you should take it off because you're a business owner and people assume that you have deep pockets. And so they'll like bow up and stop in front of you in the interstate and think that they can get all your money. There's nothing I can do to keep you from getting sued, or there's nothing any attorney can keep you from being sued. It's just ultimately at the end of the day, like what liability you would have if you're following kind of the things that we said and you're not connecting yourself trademark wise to that company, your liability to Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk is next to nothing. The problem is the attorney's fees that you would spend to fight that, to say that. They have not been successful thus far. My company hasn't changed course. So that's kind of the decision that we've made, is that we're not gonna, live in fear of them. But then I have people who it's not that they don't want to live in fear. It's just not a huge part of their business. And so it's just not worth the, potentially hiring an attorney to file a motion to dismiss at some point.
So is there a middle ground there where you have retained legal counsel to, respond to them and just say, go pack sand, so that there's a closure type of thing, versus there's ignore or get out of the business, but is there somewhere in between?
Yeah, I don't know the effectiveness of it. And my speculation was just because every single letter looks identical and it's all from one firm, is my speculation is that they have kind of like a CRM service that's like, print these letters in mass. We don't receive a response. Calendar out in in 60 days, we'll send another letter. And my thought a couple months ago was, maybe if you hire an attorney to send a letter, it at least kick you out of that bucket of like hasn't responded, still moving forward. I don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze to hire an attorney to just stop getting the letters. But ultimately it's all down to like that attorney letter is not going to like really scare or deter another attorney, but it could potentially move you from hasn't responded, still moving, into has hired counsel. That could have some effect, but I don't know at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Let's see. Okay, so here's another one. There are a growing number of people who are using telehealth platforms that are essentially doing all the prescribing, right? And so the question, and one of the bigger ones that people talk about, it gets a little bit crazy because it's very MLM like designed. So everyone's trying to get people to onboard with them. But one of the platforms, LAMD, and there's some others. But would you have to take a stance on those people who are maybe not medical providers, but they're practitioners of some sort with some amount of knowledge that are using telehealth platforms like that to with their own medical director and oversight to prescribe peptides?
Yeah, so help me understand the workflow. So you've got not a licensed provider, not a nurse practitioner, you've got like maybe an RN. Is that who you're?
Correct. It could be anyone on that spectrum. Could be medical, could be NPs, could be doctors, or it could be non-licensed people, but they have a client base, and these client base are interested in peptides. And then there's these telehealth platforms, LAMD being one of them, that basically gives commissions to affiliates. So essentially, the way you go, oh, I'm partnered with this telehealth platform, I send them over there, they do the entire transaction over there, and then I get a commission of some amount for making that referral. But all of that's done by the platform and the medical oversight of the platform.
Yeah, I think if you're not talking about a nurse practitioner or someone with prescriptive authority, it sounds skeezy, but it doesn't sound like huge red flags, because ultimately it doesn't sound a huge red flag for the RN, because ultimately they're not the one writing the prescription anyway, and the liability would fall on who's writing the prescription. If it's a full practice date, it's the APRN, or if it's not, the APRN with the MD oversight. I don't worry so much about the RN, because they're writing their prescriptions not within their scope, or they shouldn't be. But I think you'd have a hard argument if you're a nurse practitioner and you're outsourcing just that element of your practice to put that liability on someone else, which I've seen that. I actually know of someone they were the medical director of a facility, and the person decided to split because that medical director would not allow research grade peptides. And they said, okay, great, you're going to be the medical director of these 5 services that you've approved of, but I'm going to get a separate medical director for these research grade peptides, but I'm going to house them all under the same location, and I'm treating the patients. And that medical director was like, this is too much for me, because I don't want to get caught up in some like scheme where, yeah, I'm not the one signing off on the end of the day, but I'm contributing in this. And I tend to, I don't know ultimately what would come from that, but I think that was a smart move on that medical director. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I mean, I definitely know that these telehealth platforms only source from 503A pharmacies, so they make a very big point of that. So they're sourcing, their entire infrastructure is all legitimate
Yeah.
sourcing. It's
Oh,
not
good.
it's not a
Okay.
blend. So
Yeah, my question then would be, I don't, I think that you can get into some kickback laws and stuff, because I know of a couple of influencers in the TikTok world who promote LEMD, and that's where they get their medications from. They're essentially sending, I think that's kind of a conversation or potential liability that LEMD holds, of if they're incentivizing referrals or kickbacks and stuff. But so if you're a nurse practitioner, I don't know why you would use them over just operating within the scope of your license.
yeah, I think what I've heard for licensed people, at least generally speaking, is um, limit their liability on the peptide side of it, to some
Yeah.
degree, right? So I'm an NP, I can do all these other things, but on that, I'm gonna figure out, various partnerships. And LEMD is just one example. There are, other platforms that.
From what I was told, like we are always held to the highest of our education and licensure as a nurse practitioner. I can't say this other nurse practitioner, Susie, gets all the blame. Like for a nurse practitioner myself, I would just be giving all of my risk to someone who may potentially be less intelligent than I am. Maybe they're smarter than me, but does that make sense, Courtney? Like
Yeah.
as a provider, I can't let another provider make that decision and take the blame off myself. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think that the only time that you can do that is if it's really outside of not your scope of your license, but the scope of your like knowledge base.
But I think for non-medical people or like fitness influencers, I think they can do it.
Yeah.
But nursing, I would stay away from it just because
Yeah, I would
too
operate.
dangerous.
Yeah, ultimately, I would, if you were talking about just normal peptides from a 503A, I'd be like, you just need to do it. You're not benefiting anything from giving that putting your patient population over to another source for only this limited scope of treatment, but you're treating them for everything else, but you're also aware of the other treatment. I think
Yeah, it's like, it's a conflict, I feel.
yeah, the only way, I think the only world that that would make sense, right, is when you're truly two different specialties. Like you got your primary care and your specialty care, and they're creating like kind of co-treatment plans. I think that makes some sense, but I don't see a world where that makes sense in
Okay,
what we're dealing with. Yeah.
great. Another thing came up in our discussion board where the board of either pharmacy or board of nursing will go into a clinic and do like a pop inspection. And there's been some people that have said, I remember one specific discussion we had in the group where the board of pharmacy confiscated like $5,000 or $10,000 worth of
Yeah.
peptides. So
Yeah.
any thoughts or insight into how to handle those kinds of uh, unannounced visits?
Yeah, so technically, the board can come in unannounced. I think a lot of people are like, I hear, and I've got my notes pulled up over here because someone had asked for links to stuff, so I can get that to you all. I just saw it in the comments, but technically the board can come in and announce, and people I normally hear, well, they came in without a warrant. Okay, well, they're not the police. They don't have to have a warrant. And it is tied because it's a highly regulated industry. It is a condition upon your licensure that they are allowed to come in and inspect. I very, very rarely see someone from the board come in on a Monday morning and you have no idea about the fact that they're going to be there. Like you've had no correspondence, no anything. I do understand that it happens. And I have been involved in some of those, and I'll just tell you, they had some idea that someone was coming. Just
Mhm.
because they didn't get an invitation to the party does not mean that they did not know a party was not about to happen. Um,
Right.
and so, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I had an inspection with the board last week, not for anything bad. It was for a TDD license for a new location. And we were just, I've met her obviously other places, and she said, yes, they are going into places unannounced. And this is in Ohio. There have, like you said, been the warning signs, but it's people using the research grade stuff. And yes, they are confiscating it and they are shutting them down, and they're then reporting them to their state, it's the pharmacy board, they're reporting them to their state licensing board and going after criminal charges.
Yeah. And so what I would tell someone, and I just had someone ask about this, I spoke at a conference, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, I would remain calm. I think if you are right in the middle of seeing a bunch of patients, I think it's reasonable to ask that, you be allowed to finish your patient care and that they can come back. Is there a time today that they can come back? I would certainly, if you are overly concerned, I would certainly reach out to an attorney. But at the end of the day, it's the line of being respectful, and this is a condition upon your licensure, but not allowing them to like peruse through the entire location. So they're perusing through the entire location, that's search warrant type stuff. But if they're just saying like, we received an anonymous tip that you are getting your medications from an unlawful source, can you show us your fridge? And that is a question that they're allowed to ask, and you are supposed to take them to your fridge, and then they can inspect from there. When they say, can we open every cabinet and can you show us your financials and stuff? You respectfully be like, I think this is a good time for me to call my attorney and have it. I mean, I would encourage you to call an attorney anyway. But just knowing that it's, if it's something tied to your licensure, then they are allowed to ask questions and they are allowed to come in. If it's tied to your business, I would ask to hit pause. I would never, and I truly mean this, I would never sign anything that the board sends me without having an attorney look it over. Because
Yeah, that's a good advice.
I tear those affidavits apart because they have you agree that like the crazy things that if I got on a call, every time I get on a call with someone and I'm like, this is what you're agreeing to, right? And that, no, I can't agree to that. Like, there's never been any patient, I've never had a patient have any type of adverse event, like in front of me. Like, you never had a patient have an allergic, like, you're just agreeing to way too much. And then what they'll do is take that affidavit and be like, well, what about this complaint? Because they agree that they had an adverse event. You're like, oh, well, I thought you meant an adverse event that like required hospitalization, not like a localized rash. And it's like, well, you said there was no adverse event, so you're a liar. You're like, no,
Yeah,
it was just not clear.
I think that's good advice, meaning anything that they give you to sign, just respectfully decline to sign it then until your lawyer, your lawyer reviews it.
Yeah, just make sure that you're actually agreeing to the full scope of what they're saying to you. It should have, by the time an attorney's finished with it, an affidavit or anything, an agreed order, consent order should have a million caveats all throughout it. Like, because, I'm only agreeing to this very limited subset of material that's relevant to the investigation that you are, whatever investigation that you're at. And you're allowed to ask questions too, can you let me know, like, why you're here? What's the scope of the investigation? It's a great question to ask. So at least you're having them on the front end kind of say what their purpose is, so you can help direct them to the right they need. But I think it's reasonable too, if you're in the middle of a busy day and a busy season, to say that this would be really disruptive to patient care. I can have someone try to reschedule my rest of my appointments this afternoon. Is it possible for you to come back in an hour?
Yeah, great. And I see this pop up. Somebody, Andreas Cruz, actually asked this. Are compounding pharmacies that furnish Category 2 bulk drug substances, such as popular peptides, operating outside the bounds of the law? And if so, do they bear the primary legal and regulatory risk? Or can clinics be held liable when engaging with them for the patient fulfillment? And I think you might be able to answer this with your slide, but I wanted, because I have seen that where there are pharmacies, maybe some of them have changed, kind of in real time, but there are pharmacies that are compounding, offering something that is technically on Category 2, but you can get it from a pharmacy. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So my initial thought is, that doesn't smell right. So, I what I would want, if you were sitting in front of me, I would be like, let's look at the authority COAs of that compounding pharmacy first, because they are putting, it's more than just GLP-1 type essential copy risk. They aren't allowed to compound with Category 2 or Category 3. So they're putting their entire business at risk, which, like, pretty black and white. So that
I've
makes
even gotten emails from pharmacies and they say, due to our recent lawsuits, we're now allowed to have these peptides. And it sounds really good, but I think it's just some marketing. They just trick you.
Yeah, because it's, ultimately my question for you to you all is like, you're allowed to get it from a 503A pharmacy, but verify that you're getting it from a legitimate 503A pharmacy, because
Yes.
it does not smell right. Because I can't think of a business decision that would make a pharmacy put their entire business at risk, because it is black and white for that pharmacy. It's not like when we get into this essential copy conversation, it's like, what is technically an essential copy? If I compound it with glycine and B6 and something else, like, is it the same? That's gray. But Category 2 and Category 3 is not gray for a
I
compound.
also feel like if your ethics are compromised and you're lying about that, how do we even know what is in that bottle? Because there's been studies where they went to GNC and they took something off the shelf and it was like sawdust. So if your ethics are so compromised, we really can't trust that you're not putting some carcinogenic, cheap thing in there. Yeah, I have no confidence in you at that point if you're willing to kind of cross the boundaries of the law on something that's not allowed.
Yeah, and one of the things I would say too, this is like a business hat conversation, is, are you building your business model on something that isn't scalable. Like maybe that pharmacy does it today, but you're not going to be able to get it forever. Like they're black and white in trouble, so they're going to get something happen to them. So then you're gonna have to shift pharmacies. You're gonna shift your model. Now where are you going to get it from? I just don't know that that's like the best scalable decision is to go, that route.
Yeah, and I think one of the primary example, I mean, I've seen two examples of in recent times. One is where, because BPC 157 has been on the category 2 list for a while, but there have been one or more legitimate 503A pharmacies that are still compounding it and offering it for, for ordering. So that's one. And I know there was at least one or two pharmacies that were offering retatrutide under IND, right? So they were, again, a legitimate pharmacy. They were offering it under investigational new drug framework. So I think that's where practitioners and people obviously get a little confused, because like I'm getting it from a pharmacy. They say it's okay. I don't know all the laws. I don't know all the laws and regulations of the FDA. So
Yeah.
is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we'd have to go through. That's good to know, Jenna. I think ultimately I have to go through like this specific example of like, let's take a look at this pharmacy, the medication that you're talking about, and walk through and make sure that you're still making a good clinical decision. Because part of this, which I say this to the group, part of you saw it on the slide, we meet once a week. The current group meets on Wednesdays, and anybody who works with me that's in this group can attest that I say this often is, at some point, it's like, here's the law and then here's the clinical. And you have to be willing to stand before your board, which is the board of your peers, and say that you made a good clinical decision. And just to discuss, like, you're getting these medications from this pharmacy, but this medication is on the do not compound list. Like, did that raise any red flags for you when you were vetting? You just have to have the confidence to be able to stand in your clinical decisions at that point, that you vetted your sources, got your medications from the right spot, but then it switch over to clinical, that you are providing the best services, down to even the medications, and care from to your patients.
Yeah, there are definitely some people popping up here in the comments saying Strive has BPC 157, Stryker does. Another one says, so should I stop ordering BPC 157 through Grand Avenue Pharmacy? They are 503A. So it's definitely like, it seems like Lake Hills 503A ethically provided BPC 157. So it seems like
I mean, I don't mind, just as a result of this, like, to look in with that specific example with that pharmacy and BPC 157 and kind of put something out to the group.
that'd
Kind of
be so
walking through like that, taking what we did today and then walking through the legal analysis of when does it switch over to be, into your clinical decision. There was a question I saw here that I thought was good.
Okay.
I say that.
Have there been any legislation in the works to kind of get rid of the non-research purpose only peptides that are out there? I think that's one of the biggest things. I
think they're
that's
cracking
kind of an
down,
issue.
Courtney, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's about to be really a problem for them.
Yeah, I don't think
Have you heard any research or any legislation that's going to be happening? Because there's people literally buying peptides out of people's cars and getting it from China. I just wondered, have you heard anything?
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily legislation, Jesse, but I think what's so right is the boards are cracking down. So that's within the board's ability. So you've got just, the overlap of boards in this case. If you're talking about someone buying out of the back of a car, that is the board of pharmacy, because they're distributing. Do they have a license to distribute? That is the FDA, because that medication is not from a lawful source. That's the board of nursing or the board of medicine, whoever's involved in that. And there's so much noise around it. And that's what we're seeing is people cracking down, the boards themselves cracking down and sanctioning people, putting people in jail, that type. So not necessarily legislation, because the legislation, like so many things, in our country. The legislation is there. We just have to enforce it, which I do see a lot of right now.
You said you had found another question in the group that
Yeah,
you.
I was looking at it and I couldn't find it again, but essentially it said something about drawing up medications and sending them home with patients.
Yeah, I
Uh,
saw that. Yeah, is it illegal to draw up doses from the vial and give it to patients? I buy it in bulk because shipping is so expensive.
yeah, so illegal is not the right word to use. It's not compliant. Pretty across the board not compliant because without getting into some state specific laws. So the first the overlap of board. So if you are drawing up medications and you're administering into a patient, that's your board of nursing, board of medicine, whichever board you fall under, because that's within your scope to administer. When you're drawing it up and you're sending it home, that switches over into distribution.
Right.
And are you allowed to distribute that medication and under what circumstances by the Board of Pharmacy? I say it's pretty non-compliant across the board because no one is doing it as if you were technically distributing it, like no one's doing it correctly. And the conversation I had or the presentation I did a couple weekends ago at the conference was, I hear a lot from people that they draw up pre-drawn syringes for GLP-1 medications, and then they put it in a black little bag and send it home with their patient. I'm like, congratulations, you are a drug dealer. That's what just happened. You send it home in a black bag. Like, and I think, there are a lot of different options. So here's kind of what I see that can work. If you are, I know shipping is super expensive, but if you're needing to get a patient specific medication, and there might be a little bit of state law in this that would depend on, where you're located, but having the patient specific medication in your office that you administer for your patient, if they do not want to administer it themselves, you of course can send directly to their home through the majority of the pharmacies. When we're talking about things like testosterone, can be mailed directly to them. I see people do kind of an in between where they get a patient specific medication. The patient comes in office for a set period of time to do kind of some monitoring and education, and then they transition to where it's being sent at home. But I would highly encourage you all not to draw up medications and send them home. Also, there's, an efficacy issue of that medication is not meant to live in an insulin syringe if that's what you're using for 4 weeks. Like, what happens to that medication in the meantime?
Got it.
I
Um,
also think that there's concerns about sterility. You shouldn't do that. Like if you don't have like a sterile hood and everything, you can get dinged on that because you're not drawing it up sterilely as the pharmacy would.
Yeah.
cool. I mean, I know we have some more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have a couple more minutes, or do you want me to maybe grab some of the questions and send them to you and see how we might address them after?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of minutes. I will tell you all, I'm at Eastern time, and so it is 9 o'clock. I can't guarantee that mid question I might not turn into a pumpkin. Um, but I'm happy to answer as many as I can.
Okay, cool. Let's see if there's anything else that's popped in. Some more BPC 157. Some have brought up a couple other compounds that are available from pharmacies. So I'm going to share those with you too, Courtney, just so that
Okay.
you have reference to them.
I am going to put in the notes just because people had asked for it. And I know this is recorded. So um, this is the handle to find me on pretty much everything.
Gotcha.
And then I mentioned first, the first way to work with me is called the protective practice. It's the lowest offer I have, which is just, I keep people informed. It's one where I said we're talking about this week, PTGF, because it's the new under eye crave.
Are these the memberships that you recently renamed?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it was like I named them like an attorney. Mike, did you read my newsletter?
I definitely I read your newsletter.
That's so exciting. Yeah, I recently renamed them because I named them like an attorney, and that was a really dumb business decision. But like so many things, like this is I've owned a bunch of businesses. I've learned from, when I was I'm an attorney for businesses, so I learn from them all the time. People who make, mistakes, and I learn from them on their dime, not on mine. But I named two programs like an attorney would, and they were wildly successful. I've had tons of people that work with, but I spent the first 30 minutes of every onboarding call because no one knew which one they needed. Like, what does
Right.
it mean? And so this is the second link, which is a Google Doc, is the application for becoming a member of the residency. So that's that 6-month program. I start a new cohort at the beginning of every quarter. So we have four cohorts a year. You go through the whole 6 months together. And kind of the marketing for that is like the opposite of when someone says, you'll pay me this and not a dollar less, because that's what I'm worth. I'm like, no, you'll pay me this and not a dollar more. That's the goal. Is
Right.
I want you to get your legal foundation set up. So this is the set cost of what you're paying. And that should you ever need an attorney in the future for, a board of nursing complaint or something like that, of course, but you've got, all the little pieces of your business, the foundation set up the way it needs to be in the documents to support it.
Yeah, there are some questions in here about how to get in contact with you and also about your plans. I will share that when I recap this and share this video in our group. I'll make sure that people, know how to reach you. And I think Curtis asked about the weekly group. So I think most of these are like some sort of paid membership with you, right? And
Yeah.
then it's like, so it's kind of a coaching type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. And Curtis Johnson asks, "Do you work with larger groups?" I have 300 members in my group, so I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I think Curtis, you can send me an email to let me know what you mean by working with a larger group and what that
Oh,
could.
right, yeah. So that could be, like a bigger collective of people,
Yeah.
right? Versus an individual person. Like, do you do like maybe that's if I have a business with 50 people in it, like how do I how do I
Yeah.
engage with you that way? Right. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today. So thank you for your time and thank you for all the insight. And I'll make sure that the group knows exactly where to reach you.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. And I really do mean this. I answer so many things in my
Thank
email,
you.
on DMs. Like, always just shoot me a message. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah.